ladies and gentlemen. This is Arab TV, and I'm your host, Zaid Faransso, for another episode. With me today is Ziad Al Bawab, and Ziad is a speech scientist at Microsoft. When I heard that, I had tons of questions about what this is and what it means in today's tech-driven life. But then I heard his story, and I had even more questions about what brought him from hometown Lebanon to this part of the world and how the story went. Welcome, Ziad.
Welcome. Thank you, Zaid, for having me here.
Pleasure to have you here. And like I said, I'm going to take you back in time a few years ago, not going to say how many years though, into that time in Lebanon when you decided to take the big move and jump out, move out of the country. What drove you into this decision? Or let's do that a bit different. Let's say, what kind of life were you living at the time and how could you come up with a decision?
Well, that's an interesting question. For me, my life progression has actually was taking it one step at a time. But my biggest motivation at that time was my uncle who was living here. He's a doctor living in West Virginia, and he believed like the world is for computer engineers, and I was doing computer engineering back in my American University of Beirut. And I was finishing up, and I thought maybe I should give it a shot and apply for master's degrees in the US. And that's what actually I did. I saw my friends who were senior year, where they were applying for masters, and I was like, okay, did the GRE, got an acceptance with a pretty good school here, and also with a full scholarship. So I give it a try, and I just left and packed my bags and came here to Los Angeles, and I did my master's, and then here I am.
So you did your master's in Los Angeles. It was a successful period of your life. I want to ask you a question. Based on the shape of the kind of life you were living at the time in Lebanon, what do you think is needed to make such a big decision? Is it just your own motivation? Is it someone you listen to? Is it a decision to leave the country? To how far did the situation back home drive you to leave?
Well, it's a mix of all the things you mentioned. It's definitely situation back in Lebanon was not too bad at that time. It was 2001. Things were okay. And of course, I was finishing up in my bachelor's of computer engineering at the top of my class. So opportunities there were not as seductive as opportunities here. So I was like, maybe I should give it a shot and try coming to the US to further increase my educational background. And so life there was good, but I thought maybe we always hear of the American dream, and I thought maybe that was something I should try. And also I've seen it how other people succeeded, and it was kind of the norm for many. Unfortunately, right now, it's kind of the norm of people in Lebanon and maybe other countries that really kind of engineers, doctors, and many other professions, they seek jobs outside of their home country because of the different situations. Maybe the economy is not as good as here. The security situation definitely now is not very good.
Yes.
So there are many reasons, like you think, that drives young people to just immigrate. And of course, I'm no different than many of these Arab kids who just left their countries seeking a better life somewhere else.
Right.
We love our countries, but
we do
think the US provides a lot of ample opportunities for hardworking people, and we hear stories, and we believe that you could really, find whatever you want here, and kind of develop a career and a safe and a nice lifestyle here. So that's the main motivation.
Indeed, yeah, it is a very valid reason. So you're in Los Angeles, you finished your master's, but that wasn't the end of it.
Yeah, actually, so let's back up a bit. When I was doing my senior year, I went for an internship in England, and there I was I was doing an internship at British Telecom, and it's one of the telecommunication companies in England. And I was introduced to the field of speech synthesis, like how you could have a text and you could read from it and play whatever was written in a sentence. So I came for a master's at UCLA in speech processing lab, and there I was also introduced to speech recognition.
Mhm.
So I did an internship after my master's as well in one of the big companies in the field, the speech recognition field, and I decided to move on to the next level, which is a PhD in speech recognition.
Okay. And the PhD was at?
So I went to switched university, went to Carnegie Mellon University in
Wow.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was like one of the famous universities in that field because it was like, I mean, the research done there has really lifted the field
Mhm.
and made it come true.
And during any of these steps, did you notice that you're challenged more than your peers? Did you face more difficulties compared to your average American student?
Well, of course. I mean, the peers you're saying, there are different kind of peers. There's the American students, but majority in grad school, they're in engineering. There are very few American PhDs. There are some, but not majority. Majority are like people from Asia and other countries.
Okay.
So I felt like I'm the same boat as these graduate students. So definitely there are a lot of adjustments, and you have to get used to the life living alone, away from your family.
It was
And
your first time living by yourself away from your family for
Well,
an extended period.
Yes, I mean first time living for like a good for like basically a program. Like when I went for an internship in England, it was 3 months, but here when I came to the US, it was more like starting a master's and PhD and now work. So I mean the challenges is that you try to settle down in an environment that you're not used to. Like you are not used to this lifestyle. Your family, who you really learn from them, they were not even raised here, or they're not used to life here as well. So
Yes.
they're not like the people to give you advice. That's the challenges that you find. If you call your parents, like they can help, but not as much.
They won't relate.
Right, exactly.
And let me ask you this. We were talking about the period of about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2003.
Yeah.
Or did the period of 2001, September 2001, or the war in Iraq in 2003 carry any challenges in particular?
Well, of course, like you find some challenges mainly at airports, but in general, no major discrimination happened. Like whenever you're in an academic situation, people are nice, and there's no discrimination in these fields, like in academia. I don't know what happens in industry. In our industry, things are also the same, because maybe the quality of people that you are interacting with, like in R&D and in these situations, people are helpful and nice. So I didn't find much problems, except maybe when I'm going back home and coming back in the
Okay.
airports, like most people.
Okay, so PhD done, and now you're to find a position. Basically, your field of specialty have been determined once you've started this PhD study. So you had a preset line. Let's move now to the part that is technical.
Yeah.
What's your field dealing with, and what was the situation when you first started, and what's the situation now? What are the changes that have happened over the years?
Yeah, so speech recognition, when I was in my PhD, it was a very hot field in academia. And industry, there were few companies trying to really make an existence in that, but it was a very challenging problem. So basically, you have speech recognition is the process in which you have speech signal, like an audio, like what we're talking right now, and how the machine could translate that into text. So it's a mix of kind of like a signal processing technique where you apply it on the audio and extract some features that are related to the sounds, like the different sounds A versus etc.
Yes.
And then how you could take these features and feed them to like a statistical learner that could differentiate an A from an E. And then also you could also, once you know what the sounds are, how you fill that into a word, that's basically pronunciation. modeling, and when you put the words into a sentence, that's the language model. So the speech recognition field technically is composed of many different subfields, like the audio part, the speech processing, the pronunciation, the recognition part, and the language modeling part. So basically,
What was the situation when you started working? I bet things were not as advanced as they are right now.
right. So that's very true. Like at that time, and when I graduated in 2009, things were not bad, but were not as hot as now. So I actually, for that matter, I applied and I got a job in speech, but I also got a job in web search at Yahoo Labs, and then I took that offer actually
Okay.
because actually the people worked at Yahoo, they already had a speech background, and they were coming from another speech company, and so they knew what a person with a speech background knows, like the data processing, the algorithms, the experimentation. So all these things are important. That's what we do in speech recognition.
Yes.
We throw all kind of tools at it. In web search, like search engines, recommendation sites, news, and all these things, it's a similar problem, but in different media. You're using text versus you're using audio, like speech. So I joined Yahoo, and and after a few years, like nowadays, with the advent of, I mean, I say it, like when Siri came into life, and we found, oh, wow, like this thing is going to be like massive.
Yes.
Because now people are really introduced to this technology on large scale, and everybody is really rushing into incorporating speech recognition into their own apps, like on the phone, on the cars, in devices, like in video games, like in home systems. Nowadays, it's booming, and I feel kind of also lucky that I've chose that field. Like it's kind of booming now.
Now, as an average user, I'm going to ask the question of when do you think this thing have moved from the totally experimental point into being commercially applicable? I recall the time when Google, for example, added the voice recognition button, and then when there were a plethora of voice recognition softwares, none of which mastered the game, so to speak. In a lot of industries, for example, people are still looking for a dictation device, something that you can speak into, and it writes what you say in kind of in a neat way. And there are lots of attempts, but none of these attempts has been perfected so far. When do you think was the transition between experimentation and application?
Well, I think the transition came gradually, as I mentioned. Like it wasn't very. I think dramatically when we started seeing these things in the mobile phones, like in all these big mobile phone companies are implementing it. But I think at the beginning, when I was doing my research at Carnegie Mellon, we were actually working on a cognitive agent that learns and observes, a project called Kalo, that ended up to become SRI. Actually, it was in collaboration with SRI, but that became Siri. So we were working like long ago on these kind of projects, and now they're making light. They seeing the light. Speech recognition at the beginning, it was being applied mainly for like maybe
Transcribers.
Of course, I mean that was one of the commercial application, like medical dictation.
Yes.
And like software like Dragon was famously used in a lot of medical facilities.
Oh, Dragon was up since then?
Yeah,
it's
been a while, like
2009, 2010?
I think even earlier than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so medical dictation was it's been there for a while. It was a lot of companies came up from that as well. What else? I'm thinking translation, like speech-to-speech translation.
Instant translation.
Instant translation, because you really want to speak in your language, and the other person on the other line does not understand, say, Arabic. They want to hear it in English.
And forever, this used to be done by instant translators, actual people who sit in booths and listen to this and translate to their own language.
I mean, speech recognition, actually, how it started, like many other projects, is as a defense kind of project. Like the government kind of financing
Well,
Uh,
that's where the money is, huh?
Right. So it started there, and a lot of research came from that. A lot of companies, like a lot of universities, were using these kind of funds from different agencies to basically push this research. We getting data from. I remember we used to have like, if you have like 1,000 hour of speech, that's a lot of data. Nowadays you have way more than that. And I remember at that time, yeah, we used to use other consortiums for getting the data from. Like nowadays, I work for Microsoft. We have plenty of data. So things changed. The operating, I think, one of the major reasons that speech recognition and AI in general made it.
That's artificial intelligence.
Yeah, artificial intelligence made it big. Right now is also using the cloud computing and parallel processing. So at that time, speech recognition was mainly using one machine or one server and or two or three, and then two teams, one in the US and one in France, like in the evaluations.
Yes.
In these conferences, they would team up together and combine the results. Nowadays, I think with commercializing of speech recognition in device like phone, for example, things are in the cloud, or like in Xbox, we work on that video console, the video game console. Everything is in the cloud now, and you could really support multiple sessions or users at the same time. So I think that one, so the technology was there, wasn't really pushed because of few reasons. One was like it didn't reach the bar.
So I was going to ask this question in particular, the challenges, and I hear you saying a couple of things. First of all, the speed of processing data and the way data was processed up till a couple of years ago, where every individual server had its own entity and couldn't easily communicate with other servers. The second thing I can come up with is probably accents and the difference of the ways people pronounce things from one country to the other, or from one part of a country to the other. These are just the things that come up in the initial discussion. What other challenges of the process can you think of?
Well, the major process and the major challenge that was when I joined the PhD program was actually, even before, was noise, like noisy environments. You know, you're speaking into your phone and somebody else is playing music, or there's a car passing by, a train. How we could be able to remove the noise from the signal to recognize the speech, because we are trained on, we train in clean environments like now in the studio, but when we apply this technology in real world problems, like you have noise.
Exactly.
And pronunciation, accents, as you said, is a problem. Speaking things that are out of vocabulary means like the system haven't really heard that word before. There is no way it could really figure it out. Now, with new names of new athletes or cities or restaurants, if you speak that, it's not able to figure it out. So the more data you have, the bigger your models are, and the more they're able to capture new things. So of course, processing was a problem, but now it's solved with the large parallel processing and cloud computing.
Okay, so the ways to get over this, I guess the way to get over an accent issue is to listen for the computer, for the intelligent system to listen to longer hours of that person speaking. And that's how voice recognition softwares like Dragon work, by making you say things in the beginning so it can recognize the way you pronounce this and that and and all the other more complicated words. And the ways to isolate noise is probably more technical, by making a machine that is capable of recognizing what's actual talk and what's not, and translating the actual talk while disregarding the noise. Mm-hmm. It seems to be logical now that we see the end of it, but it definitely was.
But the thing is, this is a data-driven process.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays, if you have data of somebody speaking like behind a train, or a plane or some noisy environment, and use that data to train a model with, then you're able probably to figure it out. The system will learn. So will learn to discriminate between the real speech and the background speech. Nowadays, the technology of speech recognition started with, in the 80s, with the introduction of something called hidden Markov model. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the way of to track, for example, continuous signals. And it was applied on continuous speech recognition. Nowadays, we have in the last 3-4 years, something called deep learning, where you stack different neural networks, or like how which mimic how the brain works,
Hmm.
and they're able to discriminate better with speech sounds and to improve performance by almost 30%. So that was the biggest recent big breakthrough. That also helps against noise and accents and other problems or variability in the
Yeah.
speech signal.
Let me project this problem in the other direction. Have you ever worked on a project or on an attempt to read a written text? So we're talking about instead of a
Synthesis.
computer, yes, synthesis. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I mean, my PhD was about analysis by synthesis. So I tried to figure out what to figure out what the phone sound unit is by synthesizing different sound units and choose the one that is closest or matches to this incoming one. So I've worked a bit on that, on speech synthesis. It's a very interesting problem as well.
And can we expect a reader at the moment where we have a PDF format or a digital book in any format and a machine can read it to you? For
Yeah, I
blind
mean,
people, for example, or
definitely.
lazy people, maybe?
This technology is already there. So if you have a phone now and you
Yes.
could go to the settings and you find the, I don't know what kind of setting, but most phones have
It's usually ease of access, something
right,
like that.
yeah. And you could set that for it to read for you everything on the screen. Yeah, most phones now come with that software, with that feature. And yeah, I mean, nowadays you speak to your phone, to your car, it plays back things to you, your navigation system.
It does. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's still robotic to a certain extent, but it's way better than it used to be.
Right.
I'm thinking, for example, websites that project or that offer you books. They do have the option of having those books read to you, and whenever
Yeah.
I try to use these things, they tend to be robotic and they don't put the emphasis on the right spots. Probably another thing that needs to be shaped within the next year or two.
Yeah, I think that research is still going, is still is on, and I'm not that in that field, um, but I think I mean things have improved, and they're using different cues, like your pitch and intonation and other things to mimic, like what's the best way to read that, and even to mimic your sound, like your mobile phone at some point may be able to sound like you. You never
Wow.
know.
Star Trek technology is not that far from where
That's
we
true. I mean, obviously, the speech recognition was first demonstrated in these movies.
are. Yes. And you mentioned something about game consoles and the ability to communicate voice orders in it right now?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays I work for Microsoft, so we work on Xbox. We just released Xbox One, and you could kind of communicate with this game console by audio kind of commands. Like, you could even control your TV with it, like play which channel, increase the volume, reduce the volume, play games, move on with in the interface to go to different app. You could start Skype, everything while you're sitting on your couch. So nowadays, speech is a way to help human-computer interface or human any machine interface. It's becoming the number one means of communicating with devices. And what better than when you're sitting at home, you don't want to use your controller, you just use your phone.
I can see
Your
how,
voice.
how history or how future is progressing from you stepping up to the TV machine to actually flip channels and to sitting in your chair flipping them, and now you can give them orders.
Yeah, instead of using your remote control, now you could just use your voice as a remote control.
Wow, maybe in the future we'll just need to think of a different channel that will come up.
Yep, I think there's research on that, I'm sure.
There must be somewhere. That's really interesting. Now, I want to hear from you things that, like, let's say, pearls of wisdom that you can give to people who are interested in this particular field, especially people from our part of the world, Middle East.
Yeah.
We're talking about thousands of people who graduate tech-related studies in schools in Lebanon, in Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and the Middle East in general, and the whole Arab world. What are the things that they need to keep in mind? First, as far as the interesting fields, we know that one of the problems people face in that part of the world is that they're not in direct contact with advancement in technology, which leaves them a little bit behind. And the second thing is, what are the steps they need to follow if they want to achieve the fast progress?
Well, I think unfortunately right now, like this kind of fields are very like advanced, but there are research in universities at back home, like in Lebanon and other countries, that are kind of touching on these problems. Even in the U.S., like these kind of problems are now shifting towards industry because we have the data, like big companies. So academia, um, of course, my advice is first follow your heart. See what you like to do, whether you want to be an engineer or something else. But if you want to be an engineer and you like to be a data scientist, like who deals with audio or video or images or text, I mean, basically, there are a few things that you probably need to be strong at analytically: mathematics, programming, communication, coding, like all these few things that you need to have a good background with and take the right classes, go to the, do the right projects. Projects are very important. And read papers, read journals, read magazines, try things out. There are a lot of open source stuff on the internet. You could just pick up a programming language you like and just start coding, and you'll find a lot of opportunities opening for you. There are a lot of startups upcoming in the Middle East, interesting projects, Lebanon and Jordan.
The fine nuts and bolts of the industry, so to speak, the fine tuning of that industry, instead of just focusing on the obvious.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities, and now with the internet world, a lot of opportunities. Doesn't have to be speech recognition. Could be, I don't know,
anything else.
Anything you think of.
And most importantly, you know, follow your heart, like you said, and take the, be courageous enough to take the big step, even if it took you away from your comfort zone.
Exactly.
I'd like to thank you at the end of this interesting talk and to give us a great insight to that field and to giving us some of your wisdom and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.